Imagine you are standing in front of a giant, ancient castle with tall stone towers that reach up into the clouds. Inside those cold, gray walls, everyone is whispering. The air feels heavy, like a big storm is about to start. Usually, the people in this castle follow very strict rules that have been around for hundreds of years. But today, something is different. Something very big is happening behind the heavy wooden doors, and it is a secret that could change the whole kingdom forever. For a long time, people thought the king would stay in charge for many years to come. They thought everything was fine. But a giant mess, which grown-ups call a scandal, has started to grow like a weed in a garden. This mess involves the queen, and it is making everyone very worried. Because of this, the king has had to make a very tough choice. He had to decide if he should keep his power or give it to his son, Prince William, to save the family name. This is a story about big secrets, a hidden folder, and a new leader who is stepping up to take the lead. Get ready, because we are going to look inside the palace to see how the world of kings and queens is changing right before our eyes. Even though we are all feeling very sad right now, we are also very thankful for a life that was lived with so much hard work and kindness. I know that I am taking over a very big job with a lot of history behind it. I understand that I have many important things I must do now. People who thought that all the loud shouting and trouble in the palace were over were very surprised this week. Some new reports came out that said King Charles did something nobody saw coming. He gave Prince William all the power to run the royal family's business. This happened right at the same time that Queen Camilla was getting into some very big trouble in the newspapers. For a long time, most people thought that the king was the one who made all the big choices, and that he would never stop being the boss. Even though people heard tiny secrets about how things were a bit grumpy behind closed doors, they thought he was steady. But now, people who work inside the palace say that William might be becoming way more powerful than anyone ever thought he would be. So, what does this big swap in power really mean for the whole family? Could this change how things work in the palace forever? There was a very quiet swap of power that happened in the palace. It was so sneaky and so calm that even the people who watched the royals all day almost missed it. King Charles moved his power over to someone else in a way that didn't make any noise at all. It was so subtle that you might have thought it was just a normal, boring day at work. There were no bright lights from cameras, no big parties to tell everyone the news, and no loud trumpets playing music. Instead, the king just signed a few very important papers and moved his hand. With those signatures, he gave all the power to his son, William. He did this by going around all the old rules and traditions that the family usually follows. He even left Camilla out of the whole thing. It was not a slow or gentle way to pass on the work. It was something he did very fast because it was an emergency. It was like he was holding a burning torch, and he threw it into the hands of his son. William has been getting ready for this for a long time, but he wasn't officially supposed to be the boss yet. The way this power was handed over was actually very simple, which makes it even more surprising. Hidden inside a plain, old folder that looked a bit messy and had the letters ESD on the front, there were some very serious papers. Inside the palace, they call this the Emergency Succession Dossier. These are legal papers that the king's helpers told him to get ready just in case something bad happened. Usually these papers are only for when a king gets very sick, gets hurt, or if there is a big war. But the big problem that made them open the folder this time had nothing to do with being sick or a war. It was about a secret, a broken promise, and people not being able to trust each other anymore. When someone breaks a big trust like that, there is no time to wait or have a big ceremony. King Charles signed his name, and his most important helpers signed theirs right after him. He didn't look happy or proud when he did it. He didn't feel like he won a game. He did it because he had to. He did it because he knew he couldn't wait any longer to make a change. Even though nobody has given him a new fancy name yet, William became the person in charge of everything. Every single choice, every rule, and every tricky move inside the big royal house was now his job to handle. It felt like the very walls of the palace were humming, because they knew the truth about who was really the boss now. The teams of lawyers worked very, very hard all day and all night to make the swap official, but they did it all in secret. They didn't want the world to know yet. There wasn't going to be a big crown-wearing party to tell the news, and the king wasn't going to tell the world he was quitting. To everyone watching from the outside, the monarchy had to look exactly the same as always. They wanted to look like nothing was changing, even though they were changing everything on the inside. But even so, small things started to change right away. The Queen's big meetings were quietly canceled. The things she wanted to work on were put away on a shelf or slowed down. The big machine of the palace that once felt like it would never change was being taken apart bit by bit. very quietly and very fast. People who know what is going on say that William's first choices as the new leader were very tough and serious. He wasn't doing it to be mean or to get back at anyone. He was doing it because he wanted to show that he was in control and that everyone had to follow the rules again. He told the workers that they had to change who they talked to and who they listened to. The helpers who used to only listen to King Charles were now told they had to talk to William instead. If anyone tried to argue or say no, they were quickly told they couldn't do that anymore. If they didn't want to follow the new rules, they were replaced with new people. There was no time to sit around and wonder what to do. The royal family, which has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, was changing in a way that nobody on the outside could see. Camilla's power, which used to be very big, started to disappear more and more every single hour. Her closest helpers were given new jobs far away. The person who talked to the newspapers for her was told to leave, and the projects she cared about were quietly put away where nobody could see them. The space she used to take up in the palace was getting smaller, and it was making room for William's new ideas. Every hallway, every office, and every old rule started to slowly change to fit William's way of doing things. It was such a big change that people who thought the palace would never change started to wonder who really had the power anymore. Then, something very spooky and intentional happened. King Charles vanished from the palace. He didn't leave the country and he didn't leave his family, but he stopped letting people see him. Late one night, with only one helper by his side, he got into a black car and drove away. Nobody knew where he was going, and nobody knew when he would be back. For a man who had waited almost his whole life to be the king, seeing him disappear into the dark night while his son took over was a very big deal. It showed that the royal family was at a fork in the road. Some people whispered that he would be back in a few days. Other people thought he might never come back to work at all. Outside the castle gates, everyone was guessing and making up stories. The official news didn't say yes or no, which made everyone even more curious. But inside the palace, everyone knew the truth. The power had moved, and Charles was no longer the one who made the final choice. Once you give away power like that, you can't really take it back. Every helper, every worker, and every lawyer knew that what happened next would decide the future of the royal family for a very long time. While the whole country was guessing and acting surprised, one person was quietly becoming very important. Most people couldn't see what she was doing, but it was very important. Princess Catherine didn't say anything to the public. She didn't do any interviews on TV, she didn't smile for the cameras, and she didn't show up at fancy events. But behind the closed doors of the palace, she was doing a huge amount of work. She was very smart and very calm, and she had a very clear plan. Every move William made and every new rule he started had her ideas behind it. She talked to leaders from other countries to make sure they understood who was really in charge now, even if they didn't say it out loud. She didn't want people to clap for her or say she was doing a good job. She just wanted things to be clear and for the family to be in control. She was helping to build the new version of the royal family. A big moment happened when a helper suggested that maybe they should try to be nice to Camilla again. They thought maybe she should come back to her public life so that people wouldn't be so stressed out. Catherine listened to the idea, stopped for a second, and then said something very simple. She said, "That won't be necessary." The way she said it was very confident, and it made it clear that there was nothing more to talk about. The helper, who had been trying very hard to change her mind, suddenly became very quiet. People who worked there said that moment was actually a little bit scary because she was so powerful without even raising her voice. There was no more waiting around or being unsure. The time for being indecisive was over. Catherine had drawn a line in the sand for the new way of doing things. She was the secret force in the middle of everything. She made sure that William's time as the leader started with him being in total control and having a very clear goal. Now we have to ask, was this just Camilla quitting or was she being kicked out? Let's look closer at the big mess she got into. At first, it just sounded like the kind of silly gossip you hear in the palace hallways. People were saying that something felt wrong with the new things Camilla was trying to do. But then, the rumors started to feel very real. People who used to be very loyal to her started telling small secrets to reporters. One worker said they saw some very important papers being taken away in the middle of the night. A maid said she heard some very loud and angry fighting behind locked doors. What started as tiny whispers grew into a loud and worried sound that moved through the palace staff like a cold wind. Then the first real piece of truth came out. A person who works at the royal house decided to tell the truth. They were very careful and didn't want anyone to know their name. They said there were secret, coded messages between Camilla and someone who was kicked out of the palace a long time ago. If these messages were real, they wouldn't just make Camilla look bad. They could reveal a giant secret that the royal family had been trying to hide for many, many years. The palace felt the shock right away. People stopped trusting each other, and secret investigations started to happen. In the middle of all this, Camilla's newest work papers completely disappeared. This was work she had told everyone was very important for making the royal family more modern. The papers weren't just lost or put in the wrong box. They were totally gone. There was no copy on the computer and no backup anywhere. One of the people who keeps the royal history was even told to leave their job without any reason. As the newspapers started to figure out what was happening, Camilla stayed away. She canceled 2 big meetings and didn't go to a big environmental meeting that she had helped start. She just said she wasn't feeling well, but that made people even more suspicious. Everyone in the world was curious, and the stress inside the palace was higher than it had ever been. Because the Queen wasn't there, a lot of planned events were messed up. King Charles looked very sad, distracted, and weak. Workers saw him walking all by himself in his gardens, looking at his phone with a very worried look on his face. Then things got even more mysterious. King Charles disappeared from the public for 3 whole days. No pictures, no talking, and no news. People started to think he was very sick or that he was quitting, but what was happening behind the doors was even more intense. Inside the palace, William was called to a meeting that was not just a normal talk. It was a big emergency. People said there was a lot of yelling and that it was very urgent. One helper left the room looking very pale and didn't say a word. William, who is usually very calm, supposedly got so mad that he hit his hand against the table. He was tired of Camilla's problems, and he was tired of his father not making a choice. He wanted answers right now, and he wanted someone to do something about it. While the rest of the world was guessing what Camilla did, even darker truths were coming out. William was about to take over a giant mess that would change everything forever. Even though he had seen a lot of trouble in his life, nothing had prepared him for how big this problem was. The royal family was trying to stay old-fashioned while also trying to be modern, but now they were facing their most dangerous problem ever. In the middle of this big storm was King Charles. He was torn between his love for his wife, the history of his family, and his biggest fear, which was losing control. Behind the palace walls, he was starting to feel very overwhelmed. He had waited longer than anyone else in history to become the king, but now he felt like he was trapped in a golden cage. Catherine decided that her next job was to control the story that people heard. Every single thing the palace said, every secret that got out, and every picture was watched very closely. Her media team worked like a group of soldiers. They checked every question from reporters before it even got to the palace. They stopped rumors about Camilla and made sure the newspapers only said what the palace wanted them to say. What people thought was going on was now being carefully guided by Catherine. She was the one in charge of the family's image, even though nobody saw her doing it. In his private room, where the paintings of his family's ancestors watched him from the walls, the king turned to his journals. He wrote in them because it was the only place he could say what he really felt without following royal rules. He wrote about how unsure he felt and how it felt like the world was slipping out of his hands. He started to wonder if he had been wrong about the woman he had tried so hard to protect. Could his love for Camilla be the very thing that was hurting the royal family he had spent his whole life trying to save? This was a very big and sad question for him. He had always been so loyal to her, but now that loyalty was causing a lot of trouble. People were starting to wonder why he gave all the power to William. Let's look at William's sudden climb to the top. Behind the closed doors, the quiet parts of the royal family started to move in ways nobody expected. The top helpers who used to listen to every word the king said were now meeting in secret. They were whispering in small rooms about what would happen next. They wrote notes without the king knowing and talked about how to move the power over to William. Even though the palace looked quiet and calm to people on the outside, it was full of nervous energy on the inside. It felt like something huge had shifted and it could never go back to the way it was. In the middle of this mess was a man who felt pulled in 2 different ways. He wanted to be loyal to his queen, he wanted to protect his son, and he wanted to do what was best for the crown. The pressure kept getting bigger and bigger until it finally became too much. Charles did something that no king usually does. He asked to have a private meeting with Camilla without anyone else there. No helpers, no workers, and no one to listen. For the rest of the night, nobody was allowed to go near that part of the castle. Nobody knows exactly what they said to each other, but the people close to the king said it was like a giant earthquake happened. For the first time in a very long time, Charles refused to stand next to Camilla at a public event. They didn't tell anyone why. The photographers were even told to make sure she wasn't in the official pictures. This was a very clear sign that something had gone wrong and a line had been crossed. The newspapers and reporters were very excited about all the drama. They started talking about old problems again and looking into Camilla's past. People who used to be her friends started talking to the press. This time, Charles wasn't there to stop them or protect her. He felt trapped and very tired, so he made the biggest choice of his whole time as king. He called for William. Again, there were no helpers and no notes taken. This was not a formal meeting or a nice talk between a dad and his son. It was about passing on a very heavy job. It was like one person giving a heavy torch to the next person in the middle of the dark. We don't know what they said, but one secret did get out. Charles didn't call William my son during the meeting. Instead, he called him the person who must lead. In that private moment, the history of the country changed. A father gave up his power to his son, and the whole kingdom started a brand new chapter without even knowing it yet. Charles never wanted things to happen this way, especially not right now. But William has always had to carry the weight of two different people. He had the brave and bold spirit of his mother, Diana, and the careful and quiet ways of his father, Charles. Now, he was right in the middle of a huge royal mess. William wasn't just the guy waiting to be king anymore. He had become the man that the royal family needed to survive, whether he felt ready or not. When Charles said those big words to him, everything started to change. It was quiet and nobody saw it, but it was like a giant thunderclap. William felt the heavy weight of the job on his shoulders. He didn't feel happy or proud. He just felt like he had a very big responsibility that he couldn't put down. Everyone started to wonder if the family was fighting on the inside or if there was an even bigger problem. Let's find out. For many years, William watched his father try to keep the royal family from falling apart. And for a long time, William wasn't sure if he could do a better job. But now that the real power was in his hands, he had to stop being unsure. He didn't stop being scared because he was suddenly brave. He did it because he had no other choice. This big mess wasn't just about Camilla anymore. It was hurting the way the whole world looked at the royal family. The reporters were like hungry birds, waiting for any little bit of news they could find. William realized this was more than just his father making a mistake. This was about making sure the whole family and the whole history of the royals didn't disappear. In the middle of all the noise, he started thinking about his mother, Diana, more than ever. He remembered how she used to whisper to him and cry about how the palace worked. She told him about how people would use tradition to hide the fact that they were being mean or sneaky. She told him about how people would smile to your face but then go behind your back. When he was a kid, he only understood a little bit of what she meant. But now, as he saw people changing sides and things falling apart, her words felt very true. The palace hadn't changed at all since his mother's time. It had just learned how to be better at hiding things. Now the palace was testing William to see if he was strong enough. It wasn't a nice test. It was cold and patient. He had to decide if he would lead the family into the future or if he would let the old ways of the palace win. Catherine became the person he could always lean on. In the long hours after the king stepped back, she stood by William not just as his wife, but as a person with a smart plan. She didn't use big, fancy royal words. She spoke the truth. She reminded him who he was and why he was important. She told him what would happen if he messed up. She reminded him that being a leader isn't about wearing a crown or having fancy parties. It's about making the big choices when things are really hard. She told him that this was his moment to show the world who he was, whether he liked it or not. Even inside the palace walls, the change was very easy to see. The workers who used to wait for the king to tell them what to do were now looking at William instead. The people who write the official news notes would show them to William before they sent them out to the world. Even though he wasn't officially the king yet, his voice was the one people were listening to and obeying. One top helper even said that while the king still has the crown, William is the one who is actually ruling the country. It wasn't a fight or a mean move to take over. It just felt like it was supposed to happen because there was a big crisis and someone had to step up. But there was one talk that really made everything official. In a quiet room full of books, Princess Anne told William the truth that nobody else would say. She told him that he wasn't just getting ready to lead anymore. She said he was already the leader. She told him that if he waited for someone to tell him it was okay to be the boss, he had already failed. There were no big cheers or fancy meetings after that, just a very heavy feeling of knowing what had to be done. That night, William did something that nobody saw but was a very big deal. He wrote a secret letter that said he was now in charge. He didn't sign it because he was happy or because he wanted to celebrate. He signed it because he was determined to do a good job. He put that letter in a drawer that hadn't been opened since the day his mother, Diana, died. This was how the royal family changed, not with a big show, but with a smart plan. The power had moved. While King Charles stayed in the shadows and Camilla's power went away, William and Catherine quietly took control of everything. One of them was the face of the family that everyone saw, and the other was the one who made all the smart plans behind the scenes. Together, they changed hundreds of years of old rules to fit a brand new world. Every choice they made was carefully thought about. The palace had a new rhythm and a new way of doing things, and they did it all without making a big announcement. The rest of the world watched and waited to see what would happen next. The news was full of rumors about secrets and about the king quitting. People's imaginations were going crazy, but inside the walls, the truth was very clear. The power had been handed over. Trust had been broken, but now it was being built back up. A new time for the royal family had started. What looked like a big mess to the world was actually a very carefully planned move. It was a change so big that it would shape the family for many, many years. By taking control, William wasn't just being the boss. He was finally doing the job he was born to do. But people still wonder, what did Camilla do that was so bad? Could she be hiding a giant secret? Let's find out about the secrets that shook the whole family. Things that were supposed to stay hidden, like letters, bank papers, and secret meetings, were suddenly about to come out. This could make people stop trusting the royal family completely. In our world today with computers and the internet, it is very hard to keep a secret locked up forever. When Camilla's secret deals were connected to a person the palace had tried to stay away from for a long time, the quiet that had lasted for years was broken like a glass vase hitting the floor. It all started with one secret message that a whistleblower found deep inside the palace's computer system. At first, people thought it was just a computer mistake or a weird email. But when they looked closer, it was much more scary than that. The message came from an account that used a fake name. Once they figured out what it said, it connected back to someone from Camilla's past. It was a person from another country who had been kicked out of the palace a long time ago after a big fight with the royals. This person was now doing some very shady things with money and politics around the world. The message showed that Camilla might have been involved in some secret deals and favors that nobody knew about. This was something the palace could not just ignore. But the story got even bigger. When people looked at the royal family's money, they found some very weird payments. There were donations for charity, but when they followed the money, it went straight to companies owned by that same person who was kicked out. What looked like a simple mistake with money was actually a big web of secrets that made Camilla look very bad. These weren't just nice things she was doing. They were moves that had real power and could cause big problems. If the world found out, it wouldn't just be embarrassing. It would destroy the reason why people respect the royal family. Catherine, who was working very hard to stop the damage, went to talk to Charles. She was very serious. She told him that if this secret got out, it wouldn't just hurt Camilla's reputation. She said it would hurt the king, her, and the children too. She wasn't trying to be mean. She was telling him what she thought would happen in the future. Catherine never does things without thinking, so if she was talking like this, it meant the danger was very close. Charles was already feeling bad about giving power to William, and now he was completely devastated. The woman he had broken all the rules to marry was now the biggest threat to the royal family. As more and more people started looking into it, Camilla's past became the main story. Newspapers and online investigators found out she had links to people from other countries who had secretly helped her make choices about the family's work. Even if she didn't break any laws, it still looked very bad. The palace couldn't just act like nothing was happening. They said they would look into it, but they used words that made it sound like they wouldn't really do much. This just made the reporters even hungrier for more news. Then the biggest problem of all happened. A video was leaked. It was a bit blurry, but you could tell it was real. In the video, Camilla was having a very loud and angry fight with one of the top royal helpers. She was yelling and acting very upset. You couldn't hear every single word, but you could tell she was very mad and very worried. The video went all over the internet in just a few hours. Everyone watched it and tried to figure out what they were saying. It was impossible to stop the story now. With everyone being mad and the workers leaving their jobs, Charles had to do something he never thought he would do. He had to take away all of Camilla's power and influence. It wasn't an official ceremony, but it was basically the same as her being kicked out. So, what do you think about King Charles giving all the power to William? Do you think it was the right move? Tell us what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see more stories about what is happening in the palace.